So we have our last speaker, Dr. Riley Bove. Dr. Bove is an assistant professor in the Department of Neurology at UCSF, and she is a bona fide clinician scientist. She juggles both neurology patient care, and she's running a pretty large and productive research team. Her research largely focuses on multiple sclerosis and how hormones might affect gender differences in occurrence and risk. However, in doing so, she has grown an impressive body of research on developing innovative digital health applications in effort to bring precision medicine to bedside. Most relevant to us, she has pioneered the Bridge platform for UCSF, which enables us to incorporate novel data into the patient care experience by bringing novel data types directly to the patient note. And actually how we discovered Riley is that a group of us sat down to think how we could do this, and we got really overwhelmed and Googled it and found that she already figured out a brilliant way to do it. So I'm pretty excited that she's here today to share her experiences creating these digital applications for precision medicine.
Well, thanks so much for the kind introduction and invitation, Jeannie. It's great to see many people's names and faces. And I think that my talk can hopefully kind of bring together a lot of pieces around what we've been talking about today. And so I am speaking about the Bridge platform, and really this is sort of a 3 PI effort with Kate Rankin, also in neurology, Stefan Sanders in psychiatry, and led by also with a tech team led by a fantastic software engineer, Erica Schleimer. So we're really sort of a very multidisciplinary group working together on this question. And the question for us really started in the neurosciences with the, here's the Mission Bay campus, and you can see these centers where people are generating all these different types of multimodal data, generating algorithms, generating a lot of the types of work that have been described today. And it's all really beautiful, but then you step into our clinic, which until soon to not be, is just, above you guys' clinic at 1500 Owens, and we can't use any of those tools in the clinic. And so there's this last mile challenge where at UCSF we have a vision, we have leaders like Keith really sort of steering us, and then we actually have to be able to bring these pieces into the clinical practice. And so that's the challenge that we decided to face. With the opening of the UCSF Weill Institute for Neurosciences, which is just opening on 4th Street this summer, that's really where there was funding available to support this initiative, this Bridge platform. And so we started kind of just thinking about what are all the problems in delivering precision medicine to the clinic, and let's use human-centered design to really think through this. And here are just some of the goals that we came up with. We want to be able to run a patient's real-time live data through all these fancy AI algos, but we didn't really have a way to plug the live data into a system. We didn't want to go to another risk calculator somewhere on a website. Streamline data delivery. A big one is not waste doctor time, becoming developers, which we're not trained to be, and also sifting through more piles of data, being scalable across clinics, again, to sort of reduce effort, have the data be sensitively displayed at the point of care, be able to compare patients, pull up process metrics, et cetera, and really be workflow efficient. And so what we came up with is a Smart on Fire application, API, that is now through a sort of a 3-year process of obtaining permissions. You can access through Apex. And here's the key thing. If you're in your patient's clinical encounter, you can click Bridge. You press the button, it's an option available in your menu, and then Bridge for that patient will launch in the clinics where Bridge is live, and it'll be a Bridge specific to that clinic. And so this means you don't have to go to any other iPad or tablet or any other system. It's right there at the point of care. And that was sort of one of our key decisions, which, we think has really paid off. What Bridge does, again, it's an API, it's a sort of a visualization, it's sort of like the end product, but really it can pull data from a number of different sources. So both sort of, live data from Apex. So a lab comes in, it can pull it all the way through. Also imaging data, and images, data from surveys like REDCap or Qualtrics, more proprietary sort of custom research databases as well. So if you have a database of patients, Track TBI or any other such database, we can access data through that and thread the data all the way through to the point of care. We can show the data sort of kind of raw and unprocessed, or we can actually put the data through algorithms and then display those. So if you're thinking about complex sort of process neuroimaging metrics or something like that, or MSK metrics. And the other kind of key decision was that we really wanted a very modular design. We wanted sort of almost, plug and play widgets, which I'll show you in a minute, which could really accelerate progress. And so our first clinics, took us years to launch Bridge, took us several years. And we had to go through the sort of design phase, the human-centered design phase, and then the regulatory approval phase. We have like a spreadsheet that goes on for miles that Erica and the rest of our tech team kind of had to, plug through. And then now we're in the evaluation phase. But what has happened is the next clinic, goes quicker. And then now when we build a new dashboard for a new clinic, it can really be done within the sort of 6-month framework as opposed to much longer, and it's much, much cheaper. And so these economies of scale we thought were really important so that clinicians and other people involved in patient care don't have to waste time navigating a system that isn't designed for them. Here are the dashboards that are currently live. So we have 6 live dashboards. So autism, movement disorders, memory and aging, neuro recovery / TBI, MS, and then primary care. So we've partnered with IDASIM to have a very non-neuro, a very primary care focused dashboard as well. And I'll drill down a little bit on what these are. And we of course have a research cycle. So the first thing is, we do the human-centered design. Do people like it? Do people start using it? What are the use cases, things like that. And then does it sort of influence EMR usage in any way? And then finally, we'll go to like the real sort of, does it make a difference? And here's where you can have all the algorithms that work beautifully on research data in the world, but you have to actually be able to test them at the point of care. Does starting drug A or drug B, does intervening or not actually make a difference in clinical practice? And here's what Bridge kind of allows us to do. This is a sort of a schematic of the types of research that are enabled by Bridge. So there are multiple types of research, and these are just sort of, again, what we call widgets. I'll focus on a couple of them, but you can see in the top left, so for a patient, for instance, with multiple sclerosis, we can see their disease severity track over time, and we can see how it compares to a cohort. You can designate the cohort if it's an EHR-based cohort or a research-based cohort. You can see the medications that pull directly from Apex to see how the disease has responded to the therapies. You can create alerts as well if the patient's really going into sort of an advancing disability phase. Regional brain volumes and other sort of advanced imaging metrics. And so here's where what Sharmila was talking about, can fit beautifully. We've started creating treatment action prompts. So this isn't clinical decision support in the sort of regulated phase yet, because we really have to test this and see what actually works for clinicians. But you can do something if you're worried, let's say about depression, you can pull in the social determinants aspects of the EHR and patient-reported outcomes and so forth. I will tell you that we're testing a model like this right now in the MS clinic, and a patient did score as dangerously depressed this week, and we were able to pick it up through Bridge and intervene. And so the real world sort of clinical research applications are quite powerful. And then the algorithm pieces. The geocoding I'll get back to in a moment with a more sort of precise example. And then sort of beyond these sort of research applications, there's also just sort of thinking about the patient-doctor relationship and how does having a tool like this change EMR usage? How does it change communication? Do you get closer to talking about what you need to communicate in the clinical encounter, or is it just more digital noise, right? Data noise. And does it help the patient with their self-management and participate in shared decision-making? So these are all the different types of research that are enabled by having a custom dashboard for a given clinical context. Just to show you again, here's sort of a mock-up version of something that we've built where you can see, again, you can use the PROMIS questionnaires that are available in Apex, or you can use custom questionnaires that are deployed through REDCap. It's really up to the clinics to decide, but we can visualize whatever. And you can even set triggers, so alerts, high PHQ-9, that should trigger the clinician. Keith earlier spoke about Spoke. So Sergio Baronzini and others, sort of massive data network. So that's beautiful. But again, right now you have to access it on a website and kind of plug things in. This is an integration that's supported by a Marcus Award and now a National Science Foundation grant, where we're actually plugging real patient data into Spoke, benefiting from the multiple layers, and then trying to generate questions that are going to be impactful and relevant. And so here, this is an illustration. We're working on all these pieces, but it's an illustration that's really focused on MS, because that's my domain expertise. But the similar principles can be applied to any sort of clinical domain of choice. And then just to show you kind of just here's like what it looks like for MS. Here's what the MS bridge looks like. And one really exciting piece is in the discussion about precision medicine, of course, the diversity, inclusiveness, access, social determinants kind of conversation has really come to the fore this year. We don't want to, in these conversations, miss the layers of bias that are inherent in our data and miss the social context of our patients' lives. And what we've been able to build is a really cool integration with another really cool tool, which is the UCSF Health Atlas. And if you're not familiar with this health atlas, it's currently a website where you can go type in a location, a zip code or a tract or other, and you can see for that region, you can see a poverty index, an education, air quality, walkability score, safety, all these sort of community level determinants of health that could be relevant. And so we decided that we wanted to build this into Bridge. And so when I pull up a patient in Apex and I pull up Bridge, that automatically populates their zip code into the health atlas. And so we can actually see what their environment looks like. It's very good for referral centers because our patients are driving from 6 or 7 hours away, and we may not know what the physical environment is in their town. Doing some human-centered design with our clinicians, we also, they said that they really wanted to see resources in the health atlas. And so what we're looking for now is funding to be able to actually look at local MS specific resources like MS PTs, MS psychologists in the community. So really kind of moving, the individual, really drilling down on their phenotype and on Spoke and sort of all of the sort of really deep data analysis that can be done. And then also really stepping back and thinking about the individual in their community and using all of those approaches as well to sort of try to have much more personalized care. This has been discussed before, but what we decide for a given clinic is we do need discrete data to populate the system, reliable discrete data. And so for MS, for instance, we did create both a patient level smart form as well as flow sheet data so that every visit we can enter their disability scores, et cetera. And we also have a whole process of data extraction where we can get data out of the system and use the data for various studies. So we probably extract data for like a study a week to look at different aspects of care. This is I'm showing you this because it's an example of a mess. So this is our neuroimaging where we can actually pull real-time PACS data and visualize the images, but we can also then send them to a whole processing pipeline and pull out the process metrics. And I'm showing you this because it's much more complicated in reality than one would think. There's a lot of layers here. Happy to talk about this, but of course we can benefit from others' expertise here as well. And then just key features for engagement, defining the use case is key, and a clinical win is kind of easier than a fancy, sophisticated win early on. Questions about PROs and just improving care, improving quality of life for our patients. We need a motivated clinical lead when we build a bridge. If the clinicians aren't going to like it or use it, there's no point building it. Discrete data collection is key, and then planning validation studies is key, and engaging patients. This is something that we showed. So Erica and I spoke with Jeannie, Dr. Tay, Matt Callahan, Rochelle, others, and we did, they were very kind and didn't giggle at us because we kind of thought, well, what would a bridge look like for orthopedics? And so here's kind of a potential vision where you can see pain scores after a surgery, and bring in wearables and home monitoring and home fall reports and imaging. So I'll close by just thanking the rest of the Bridge team, the rest of the Bridge leadership, all our funders, and all of our many different collaborators, including institutional support. So thank you so much for having me here.
Thanks, Riley. I know that there's already a lot of questions for you, and Connor already secretly messaged me to lead it off. So I'll let you know.
Yeah, the fantastic talk, and can't wait for the day when I can click that little Bridge tab in our clinic. But one question I have for you, Riley, is on your dashboard, you had one of the panels was algorithms. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that, because that's something that I guess makes me a little uneasy about putting algorithms in, and what are they based on, and what about if clinicians are using algorithms that are based on flawed data and EHR data, and et cetera. So maybe you can just talk a little bit about that piece of it.
Thanks so much for this question. It's a key question, and something that I really need to emphasize is right now, Bridge is not an enterprise initiative at all. It is very much a clinical research initiative. And so you're absolutely right that the impact, the ethics, the clinical impact of being able to access these different types of data and show them in the clinic needs to be on a research level basis. So in any of our clinics, we have a sort of an umbrella IRB. In any of our clinics, we do not show Bridge to patients unless the patient has consented and the clinician has consented. And depending on the clinic, the use cases are articulated differently. And so, for instance, if we were to take atrial fibrillation and risk of stroke or something, yes, it would be awesome to be able to pull in the latest stroke risk calculator, the CHADS2, BASC2, or 3, or wherever we are right now, be able to pull that in and show that, but it has to be done within a regulated setting. You're absolutely right. So one thing we've also built is one of our integrations with REDCap is to consent forms. So if a patient signs a consent form that they agree to see their data, the consent, yes or no, pops up on Bridge, so we can make sure that that patient has consented before we show them the information. So that's a key feature. We can't just throw this into the wild. We have to really sort of thoughtfully test each of these pieces. It's just never been testable in the clinic in such an easy way before. So we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We really have to be thoughtful about this.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have time for one more question, and we'll take a 5-minute break.
Jeannie, you're muted, so you need to, yeah.
If Jeannie has another question, I will. So look, just to ask a tough question, because we can get enamored with our data and the use of our data, but in your particular experience with MS, what problem does accessing this information actually solve you don't already have solutions for in the clinic? That actually, because if you don't have a predictive component to it, it's simply collecting data you probably have access to at some level. So it has that feature. But if it takes, there's a lot of companies, a lot of startups have come into the world showing data to clinicians, only to learn that clinicians really don't have the time or interest really to look at the data unless it changes what they do. So that means they have to hit a pain point. And what's that pain point outside the clinic, outside the research setting, that something like this could show?
That's a fantastic question. And you're right, there's a big discrepancy between what we initially sought out to do and what we are doing currently. And what we sought out to do was bring to the patient their complex genetic risk score and their genes and environmental risk score and all these things, and show them, you know, fancy measures of brain atrophy. But like, do we actually want to show the patient that their brain is shrinking and that their family is at high risk, right? So when we step back and we're like, what are we actually going to show, and what use case, clinical use case will it solve? That's where, and that was one of my sort of caution points, is we kind of really move back to thinking about, you know, what would be kind of easy wins for this process. I think in certain situations, it is helpful to have something like a CHA2DS2-VASc score that you can just pull from the data, or an NIH stroke scale, or something where you need to make decisions and you can get the computation and it's been kind of tested. For MS, you know, bringing in the patient's voice, I think, is a really important use case that none of us does well. We think that as clinicians, we know so much that, you know, we don't really have a sense of what the priorities are for the patient. And so like for this patient this week, our clinician, without showing their voice and the patient reported outcomes, they would have missed that the patient was suicidal, right? Because they would have been focused on like their MS drug lab side effects. So what we want to do is visually represent the whole picture and then enable the clinical encounter to really focus on the ding ding, what's wrong here. So I think that's one of the things that we've shifted towards. And these are easier studies to do, but I think it really depends on the context. You know, if there's a simple, you know, pneumonia, or, you know, some imaging score that could be developed and that would really help the primary care clinician, that would be a very different use case. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Riley. I think that's all we have time for. And I think we are taking a 5-minute break before we go to breakout rooms. So thanks to all the speakers. This was really great. And I wish we had an hour more to chew on everything.